It's episode 12 of The Boost with Lauren Leone, SVP, Account Services and Healthcare Marketing at Cardinal Digital Marketing. Let's go.
All right. Welcome to The Boost, conversations with people promoting mental health. And Lauren Leone certainly fits that bill, and the organization she works for as the SVP of Account Services and Healthcare Marketing at Cardinal Digital Marketing. In a moment, we'll hand it to Lauren to just introduce herself and the beautiful work they're doing there. But first, Lauren, how are you?
I'm great, Steve. It's a great day here in Atlanta. We just welcomed our summer interns. They all came in this morning, fresh faces, right out of college, excited to do healthcare marketing. So that always just brings like a new energy to the office. I love, love, love seeing their smiling faces. That was me, 10 years ago when I started at Cardinal. So it's exciting. It's exciting to have them here. So it's a good day.
You started as an intern.
Not technically an intern, but like, that fresh face, like first career. Yeah, I was basically that. Paid,
Wow.
but basically.
Yeah. Paid.
Yeah.
Nice. So is this something you all do every semester? You bring in a few or?
Yeah, we do a summer and a fall, internship program, usually either recent grads or soon to be grads, and we've hired a large portion of our team out of the internship program, trained them up to do things the way we do them, and they bring, energy and excitement and new things that we didn't know, so it's great to have them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I do a lot of work in Nashville. I just live just north of Nashville, and that's one of the things I love about Nashville is that I think after New York City, it's the largest college town. So you've got Vanderbilt, you've got Belmont, you've got TSU and MTS, all these Lipscomb. So the infusion of the young, energetic, vibrant workforce mixed with healthcare, which can also have a lot of innovation. We'll talk about innovation and where that sits today in terms of some of the clients you're working on. But healthcare can also be sometimes a little bit of a late adopter or, have that kind of reputation in some instances. So to mix healthcare with the music scene in Nashville and then the college kids, I just love, it's like an absolute melting pot
Yep.
of approach. And I think that's what makes one of the things that makes Nashville so strong is to be able to draw, from different industries and then geographically, Chicago and New York and this whole side of the country that you can pull from. And Atlanta's very similar, I
Mhm.
think.
Very much so. Like you just said, we've got some great colleges and universities right in Atlanta, but in and around us, we've got, Alabama. We pull from all the Florida universities. We get a lot of people in from Nashville, Chattanooga, Charleston. So yeah, we get our interns come in from all walks of life, and they some of them moved to Atlanta just for this
Oh yeah.
program. So it's exciting.
Yeah. My brother moved out from San Diego to Atlanta. He's been there, I don't know, a decade or more and likes it. And he's in the digital marketing space. And he and I will either meet up in Chattanooga, which is fun. I'll drive down and he'll drive up. Or ideally, we go to Atlanta and get some Antico pizza, which you just mentioned ahead of time. You're going to have some. And that's one of our favorite restaurants in Atlanta.
I'll be going there tonight to for the LA Dodgers game. Freddie Freeman's coming back in town, so we're gonna get some pizza beforehand. So it's
Nice.
it's a good day when pizza's at the end of it.
Pizza at the end of the day. It's a good day. Yeah, Alex Membrio, your CEO, is always like when he'll be in Chicago, he's always like, "Oh, it's deep dish time." He's
Yeah.
always gotta have some of
Yep.
that.
When we just booked a trip to Chicago in June, and I know that's the first stop we'll make when we get off the plane.
Yeah, yeah, Gino's East or something.
Yep.
Okay, so we're gonna get into a number of things today, and I'm excited to talk with you. But before we do, like we do with every guest, we're gonna do two quick things. One is the virtual hug, and the other is the shameless plug. So we'll do those one at a time. So the virtual hug is simply a moment of gratitude. So tell us somebody or something you're thankful for today.
Yeah, I have to give my husband a shout out. I mentioned, and I'll talk a little bit more throughout this podcast about the work we do in healthcare and private equity backed healthcare. So, Alex and I, in preparation for hosting our own virtual summit later this year, have been on a conference circuit, which means My 2 kids under the age of 3 are home with dad. He is, doing school drop-off, school pickup, dinner, bath every time I'm on the road, so I've gotta give him a shout out today.
That's not easy work. That's
No,
not
no.
easy work. We have one kiddo, and my brother, when she was on the way, he said it's gonna be the hardest job you'll ever love. Is how he
Yeah.
recaps parenting. So yeah,
It's very true. When I leave here, I always say, "Time to start my real job, on my way to my real job."
yeah, legit.
Yep.
Well, that's awesome. Shout out to your husband and that moment of gratitude, well deserved. So from coming from you directly, talk about two things in the shameless plug, and feel free to brag a little bit because it comes best from you. So talk about the work you're doing yourself, and then the work that Cardinal Digital Marketing is doing.
Yeah, yep. So, um, Cardinal is a healthcare marketing agency, and so, the reason we really hedgehogged into healthcare about 5 or 6 years ago is because we call it marketing that matters. It felt a lot better and more meaningful than selling shoes online or, promoting lawyers or all the other things we could do with our marketing knowledge. It really just felt like it had a bigger meaning and we could all really get behind it and believe in the work that we're doing and not just kind of churn through our day without thinking about who we're helping or why we're doing it. So that's really the ethos of who Cardinal is. I've been with Cardinal for 10 years. I mentioned I came in here fresh faced not too long after graduating college myself and have really worked with Alex to build the organization up, to find our focus, to find our purpose, to create growth plans. And for me personally, I love what I do because I work with all of the prospects who are looking to grow their organizations, are wondering how to attract more patients and allow patients to know that their services are there and available to make those services more accessible both through digital conversion but also just finding the right places to open their businesses and where care is needed most. So being able to do that work and help them figure out their plans is really really gratifying at the end of the day. Ultimately, I get to bring them on as clients of Cardinal and they get to work with our wonderful team of 50 marketers, paid media specialists, SEO specialists, website designers, developers, content marketers, people who will help them build up their brand, get recognized and ultimately help more people. So that's really what we love to do as an organization.
Yeah, that's cool. That's fantastic, actually. And Um, we could actually talk in sort of a meta way around Cardinal's brand. But you've got you do a podcast. Like you do,
Mhm.
it's called Ignite, right? Healthcare marketing podcast. And you said you've done about 80 of those episodes over the past couple years. So podcasting
Yeah.
is right in your wheelhouse. And then the scaling up conference that's going to be virtual this year for healthcare marketers and maybe investors or PE firms, if I have that right.
Yeah, you've got it right. Our ultimate goal is to share the knowledge that we learn every day, every week, both through our clients, through our own work. And so we do that through our podcast. It's on all the app store or the podcast stores, that the Apple Podcast, Spotify, everywhere that you might listen. I always love it when someone calls and they say, I listened to your podcast and I thought I had to reach out to you guys. I'm like, someone actually listens to that. So it's great. My dad isn't the only listener anymore. We have actual listeners. So you got to love that. And then, yeah, our conference is really just an effort to bring all these brilliant marketers together in one place and talk about who's innovating, how they're innovating, how we can help each other innovate. While there may be a handful of organizations that compete for the same patients. Really, no one gets into healthcare, because they don't want to help people. They're all here for a reason, or they've stuck around for a reason. And so, it's a really great way to just get people together and talk about what they've learned and how other organizations can evolve in following their footsteps.
Yes, so many clinicians and providers have this philanthropic mindset, and that's a wonderful thing, and that extends to mental health providers and therapists as well. I've worked across a swath of healthcare, hospital marketing and health system marketing, and sort of the transition to this language around health for health systems and, the proactive quality measures and value-based care that's
Mhm.
happening. And I love how Cardinal Digital has um, has niched down into healthcare marketing specifically. And within that, you work across all sorts of multi-site organizations or, different niches and group practices and verticals, behavioral health being just one of many listed on your website. But if we could focus on behavioral health, I run this conference called the Mental Health Marketing Conference, and Alex spoke last year on a
Mhm.
panel. And as we've been, I call it riding this wave or surfing this wave, and we're just kind of trying to paddle and stay standing on this board of behavioral health as it's moving forward, especially the past few years, a little bit fast and furious. And you're well versed to talk about sort of PE's or private equity's input on that or interest in that. Um, but there's a lot of change happening, I think, in the mental health and behavioral health space. So could you help outlay sort of maybe the past couple few years of private equity's infusion in behavioral health and mental health and how that's impacted the space and then where we are today? And I know that's a big question, but I think I'm sure you can tackle it just as well as anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say, the catalyst obviously to a lot of this was when the world shut down, COVID changed everything. And we really saw that the long-term plans of the clients that we had at the time in the behavioral space were accelerated. I'm talking 2-year plans, consolidated down into 2-week plans to get the access up and running online so that people didn't have to leave their homes, but they could still continue, to get the care that they needed. And then the pressure that COVID put on society created a greater need for more mental health. It broke down stigmas. More
Hmm.
people unfortunately turned to, substance or whatever vices they had to get through that time. So those people needed more help. You had a lot of anxiety about job security, family planning, just the world changed. And so the need grew and people were willing to ask for help. And so I think that dynamic really brought in a lot of private equity who saw that they could grow organizations and help providers who had the right ideas but didn't have the capital, the time, the technology to make it happen quickly and be available. That really just kind of was what they were able to do. So we saw groups who, stood up online virtual therapy in a matter of weeks and were able to keep not only their current patients rolling on their needs and their programs. We saw, text therapy, where you could just
Yeah.
text as needed. We saw a lot of, like, counseling groups, just, groups of people that could get together and talk about whatever they needed to talk about to get it off their chest, get feedback. And so we've seen that really be the catalyst of it. And now where we are today is there was such a rapid, at least in the marketing landscape, such a rapid growth in the vertical. So many groups grew really fast, and then a lot of groups, a lot of private equity firms are still seeing it as an opportunity. But what became of that was what I see as a relatively saturated market. I mean, I think there's everyone was of the belief that if I build the organization, the people will just come. I don't have to do anything. There's so much need. And there is so much need, but there's also a lot of noise. And so what we see a lot of the groups doing today to try to stand out is really focusing on building a brand that stands for something, a brand that um, is feels really accessible and relatable. And so that's why you see groups really leaning into their value propositions, whether it is the fact that it's virtual therapy, or maybe they specialize in, LGBTQ, topics, or maybe they are really all about in person, and that's their value proposition is we believe therapy needs to happen in an office, or medication management as part of the therapy spectrum. And so those organizations that identify who they are and really lean into it and promote that and sing it from the rooftops are the ones succeeding. And the ones who just think if I run PPC campaigns for the keyword therapist near me. I'll just be busy all the time. And then that was the case for about 2 years, but it's really not anymore.
Hmm. Okay. So there's a COVID effect, obviously. And
Yeah.
then, and I would probably add that we've seen roll ups and consolidation across healthcare for a while. We saw it in ortho and optometry and different service lines, you could call it, that were outside maybe the walls of the standard health system. And it's like we've left mental health and behavioral health to very last,
Hmm.
and the irony there is it's probably one of the most critically important things we could do to make sure it's baked into the continuum of care and not simply a referral over the wall, but our minds and
Yep.
bodies are
Hope someone
connected.
picks it up.
Yes. Yeah.
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 Hope somebody catches that ball and runs with it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, but
I want to add on that, Steve. Sorry, what you just said sparked a thought that I didn't bring up, which is private equity really brought the ability to negotiate payer contracts. And a lot of the therapy groups that we're working with now take insurance. That was a major, major shift as well that I didn't call out that I think is so important.
ooh, that's fascinating. So talk a little bit more about that because that was right in line with my next question, actually, which is
Yeah.
when it's going great, and you have a managed services organization or you have a private equity firm, helping with efficiencies and optimization and scale. When you see it work well, what are the real value adds being brought to the table, and how's that impact the organization?
Yeah, yeah. I'll start with the payer contract piece. A lot of individual therapists that may be running a single provider clinic, their negotiating power and being able to accept insurance. A lot of them were self-pay prior to this, which was in and of itself, payment was a hurdle for access. And people felt like if they had, a finite amount of dollars, am I going to go spend it on a therapy appointment or am I going to just kind of figure it out on my own? And that's an unfortunate situation. And so with the roll up, what came of that was the ability to negotiate with the insurance providers to be able to bring access through commercially insured, or, even some groups, accepting Medicaid, at least to negotiate better self-pay rates, even so that those, out of network, you could still, it felt more accessible,
Hmm.
and more affordable.
Hmm.
So I think that was huge. Other things that we see going well, access. So online scheduling, some of the technologies that otherwise wouldn't be in place. So the ability to, like a dental appointment, DSOs did this 20 years ago, to be able to go online and say, I want to have an appointment tomorrow at 12 o'clock with this doctor. And then I got busy. I need to reschedule it. Let me move it around. To do so, from my phone while I'm in a meeting and I need to handle it and not have to get on the phone at 5 o'clock when I'm trying to take care of my kids and put my mental health last. So I think that was really a big shift. And then I think another big change that we've seen is just this spectrum of mental health has broadened. So private equity has allowed maybe a therapy group to expand into psychiatry and medication management, to expand into counseling, to expand into some of the more innovative treatments for depression like TMS or Spravato or ketamine, some of the more experiential, or sorry, some of the more experimental type of solutions that we know are seeing really great outcomes. And before that, therapist and their patients may have only been able to access the talk therapy that was available, and now they can push them through into an organization that can better oversee their mental health as a whole.
Yeah, depending on the acuity and availability of services and helping organizations and the providers operate at close to the top of their licensure based on
Mhm.
what they want to do with their own professions. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, my mother-in-law is a play therapist, and you know, the accounting and the billing that goes into that as a small group practice, regional office. I mean, it's just a headache. So to be able to offload some of those things and then to be able to really think about from a brand perspective. And when I think about branding, I think about the word promise. Like, promising me if I do engage you as a therapist or as an organization? And then how do you deliver on that promise? And that's your brand equity in my mind. I mean, there's lots of different ways to think about brand and brand strategy. But one thing that comes to mind in terms of differentiators and roll up is probably something you have to tackle, which is as organizations do this and they do either a build or buy strategy, talk about the idea of the house of brands versus the branded house, and maybe define that for the audience first as you see it. And then second, get into what are some of the determinations, or what are some of those war room conversations that you have
Mhm.
when you're debating which way we should go here.
Yeah, it is probably the number one topic on my discovery calls or the conversations that come thereafter after an introduction, which is how are you handling your acquisitions contractually? What are you obligated to, or what is your value proposition as an MSO? And then how are we then going to react and use that once you've made those acquisitions, or you're building on your own. And so, some MSOs, their value proposition in, convincing providers to partner with or sell their brand or some of their equity in the organization is, well, we'll let you keep your local branding, your website, your properties, and we will essentially just act as a holding company for 100, 200, 500 different branded entities. And so in that case, I think you get a lot of the back office efficiencies, but you may not necessarily get the digital efficiencies out of that. So managing 10 websites is a lot harder than managing one, and your media buys are not as efficient. But, you can, I think in those cases, they still negotiate contracts with payers at scale. They still look at technologies that can benefit the portfolio. They still take off some of the burden of revenue cycle management and some of the back office work.
Uh-huh.
In the branded house conversation, which would be more of an acquisition and rebrand or roll up into a single entity, or sometimes we see regional entities form. So you may end up with like a Northeast, a Southeast, a West Coast brand, based off of maybe a brand that they acquired that was well established and everything tucks into it. In those cases, you're kind of getting the best of both, which is the digital and traditional marketing efficiencies and the back office pieces. So rolling out online scheduling is a lot more,
Mm.
efficient. Single EHR, single, unified ad buys as a brand. You can get out and shout that brand from the rooftops at a much larger reach and frequency than you can in kind of the micro strategy. um, and then there's, of course, every version of a hybrid you could possibly imagine. So if we went into all of those, we'd be here for a week. But those are really like the two big scenarios that I see happening. And the war room conversations just become the pros and cons list of, if I want to have something this way, if I want to retain the brands, what do I lose? I lose efficiency in certain areas. If I want to go to the unified brand, what does that mean? What happens to my relationships with my providers who just bought into this, and are they okay with that? Are some of them okay with it? Are all of them okay with it? Or am I just going to set the stage and say that is how we're doing it? So you
Mhm.
just end up with this pros and cons list that the organization has to fundamentally decide where they sit and what they're willing to accept.
Sure. Yeah. Um,
And
hmm.
I get asked, like, which one do you recommend? It's so hard to answer that because I've seen success in all of them. You can be successful in all of them. If you're going to retain, all of the local brands, then let's roll on to a single website platform template. Let's kind of stamp it out. Let's have a consistent content strategy. Let's, figure out what a marketing mix and budget should look like, and then copy paste that into new markets and adjust for each market circumstances. But there are, let's get as efficient as we possibly can in that model. And we have plenty of clients that are succeeding,
Mhm.
in that structure.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, it's definitely not a perfect, comparison, but to use an Atlanta brand, I think it's Atlanta brand, Chick-fil-A, is that an Atlanta brand?
Of course, it's an
Right,
Atlanta brand. I
right,
had Chick-fil-A
right.
for breakfast this morning.
Chick-fil-A for
They're
breakfast,
interns.
Atlanta go for dinner, you're living the
Yeah,
dream.
yeah, not a healthy day, but a good day.
But it's not like you are, on a mental health road trip and, you're in California or New York, and then you are like, well, I definitely want to check in with my provider here. It's different than Chick-fil-A. So that aside, the buying efficiencies and the standardization of services and customer experience, and your website being really your new front door, especially post-COVID, but for a while now in the digital transformation, which we're well into, hopefully, although still
Mhm.
adopting components. How
Yeah.
do you? It's less about, well, I need my brand to be a regional thing, necessarily, although I can definitely see both sides. And you can see it from any number of industries, uh, well within or outside healthcare. But there is something to be said about the buying power and how the buying power can drive down cost. And then that's a great point about payer negotiation, because in terms of access, there's always a distribution problem that we have. Some counties and cities have a lot of providers, and some counties and cities have very few to none. But the payment problem, that's got to be, in addition to access and awareness, the third leg of that stool of how are we helping people, regardless of need, pay for this. And until we
Mhm.
have some federal safety net, or some national network, um, then what are we going to do? And actually, just thinking about it in real time, it's almost like mental health organizations. I mean, I've heard it compared to the Wild West. Like, follow me just for a second. I've heard it compared to the Wild West in a number of ways, right? Like, this is still an industry that's very nascent in some ways and in formation, but it's like the private market is laying the railroad tracks for the
Mhm.
national network and not relying on the federal government, which kind of fractured things down to the state level. And now it's hopefully being rebuilt. I don't know. I just had that moment in real time just now. I don't know if that's what you're seeing at all. These kind of, maybe it's on one coast versus the other, but we're connecting this network through scale.
Yeah, I mean, the burden, unfortunately, ends up falling on these organizations, because it's not being handled by our government, in a way that is uniform. And it's interesting, we see, like, organizations it's sad to see organizations that can't or don't enter certain states with their incredible services and customer, care model, simply because they financially can't afford to do so. It just, the structure in a state perhaps doesn't make sense for them. I see that a lot. I know we're talking about mental health, but in the senior care space, for example, that's a very, very interesting market when it comes to payer. And, that it doesn't change where the needs are. It just changes who can be there to help, with the need. And the organizations are driving the conversation right now.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe parallel to that, talk about telehealth and
Mhm.
the difficulties of a copy paste, marketing or branding strategy that I know you have a perspective on. But talk about what you've seen post COVID with telehealth, and where is that right now in your mind?
Yeah, telehealth, it was like a yo-yo, right? It was 95% in person. It went to like 100% virtual, and now it's kind of settling, I would say somewhere in the middle. Our SVP of strategy always uses a stat. In the podcast that you mentioned, we did a two-part series on behavioral health trends, and there's there's a statistic that I think it's something like 70% of the population, like, they don't see, that the care itself changes when you're virtual or in person, almost as if they're agnostic to it. And the decision then may be made based on a fluid basis, based on convenience, the acute need at any given point in time. But there doesn't seem to be, or the population doesn't seem to feel as if there's a degradation of quality of care if it's given virtually or not in the behavioral health space.
Hmm.
So that's really positive for the future of, telehealth and being able to make it more accessible. I don't think that means that 70% of the population is using virtual care right now. I think that's a bit of a slower adoption. I see groups, there's the groups that were born and built on virtual, but the groups that use virtual as a means to extend care, not as a way to just attract new patients, I think that's a really positive model. So whereby you have your physical locations, maybe it's like a hub and spoke model. You can come in, you've got, maybe a centralized med management, TMS, and then around it live your therapy offices. And then those offices can offer an appointment time slot, either virtually or in person, based on patient preference and how that patient wants to receive their care. So I see that as a really solid model that a lot of groups are moving towards.
Okay. So it's a yo-yo, but the yo-yo hasn't come
We've
all the way
landed
back up. It's
in the
like
middle.
it's
No,
found
it did not,
it's
it'll
found the
never come
center.
all the way back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, that just defies gravity right there. Maybe yo-yo wasn't the right analogy,
No,
but,
I think it works
uh
great. It's just that we've maybe found a balance. Things move to homeostasis always, regardless. So things return to the mean. So perhaps the mean, we're seeing it in the return to work conversation right now. I know Cardinal has some juicy jobs, by the way, that any listener should go to the website right now. And they may be all filled by the time this airs. Hopefully not, but you guys are in growth mode. But you're offering hybrid. I think it's like come in sometimes, work virtually sometimes. You and I wouldn't be able to connect like this 10 years ago. With GoToMeeting or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
Like Riverside
Yeah.
FM didn't exist and it was all
Yeah.
kludgy. And so it comes down to something, a bigger archetype, right? Like it comes down to technology aside, like what is the connection? How much connection can you have with another human? And um, there's still improvements we can make. Like I don't know, just to be kind of super meta, like right now, my eye contact is at the camera, right? Like I don't see your face because I'm looking at the camera.
Mhm.
Ideally, I would like to be talking to, a version of Lauren that's in the room with me. Maybe we do that through holograms or something in 10 years. I don't know. I don't know. That's for a different conversation. But for the telehealth solution to be one that is vastly improved from 10 or 15 years ago, you can look at it and say, well, the market is speaking, right? It's almost Pareto's principle, like 70, 80%, 70% of people are saying, yeah, this is net positive to the experience, even if it's not the only experience that you offer. I love to be able to come in and have a one-to-one heart to heart with my primary care physician. But maybe we've covered a lot of ground ahead of that. So in between my two jobs that I'm working, I can hustle in and, have a pretty efficient conversation rather than start from ground zero with my provider.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that you said that. I find myself looking at you and not at the camera, which probably isn't good for the quality of this video long term. But it's funny how we do that, right? How we use virtual to kind of our needs. So I'm looking at it and engaging with you, Steve, and not looking at the camera here right above your face. But yeah, I can totally see that. It's just the ability to do both as you need. And I think trying to put patients in a box and say all people need this or all people need that is not realistic. Just like, when we've got clients who are looking to go through a digital transformation, our recommendation is always not to say it's most convenient for me to only have online scheduling. It's most convenient for me to only push people into my call center. What about what's most convenient for your patient? Can you offer live chat, request a call back, call me now, or schedule on? Like if your organization can do that, there's not going to ever be a future in which all consumers behave in one way and one way only. There's going to be a dynamic that's constantly shifting. We've recently seen people wanting to text their providers, right? So how does that dynamic play in? What does it push out? Does it push out phone calls? Does it just add to the spectrum of how we engage? So I think it's very much just like that. You're going to have to be able to do a little bit of both.
Hmm. Yeah. And meeting people where they are. Text
Yeah,
messaging has come
that's
such a long
exactly it.
way. I think on maybe as a LinkedIn post of yours, you said 1 in 5 Americans go to TikTok for healthcare advice before they go to their doctor?
Yeah, it's currently like a validation tool.
Okay.
It may not be the starting point for research, although I think there was some research put out by TikTok or maybe an organization using TikTok. There's 3 kind of healthcare verticals most heavily using TikTok right now. Mental and behavioral health is one of them. Obesity and weight loss is another, and I think women's health was on there too. So
Hmm.
it's an interesting platform that we see evolving as a place where the younger, demographics at least do go to at least get ideas to potentially validate a decision that they're about to make on a provider or group, um, to fact check, right? To fact check what they've heard and make sure that that's in fact true. It's a source of truth for them. So
Mhm.
mental health is on that list.
Hmm. Um, the that's kind of amazing that I'm not
Yeah.
on TikTok, so I'm like a late adopter
I'm not
there.
either. Here we are,
Okay.
2 non-TikTokers talking about TikTok in theory, but I
Yeah.
don't have it.
Yeah, I leave that to the experts. It was, last year at the conference, it was one of the most popular, highly rated presentations was on vertical video and TikTok, and then after the presentation, people lined up to talk to the speaker, and then they started to make, you know, their own videos. These providers and clinicians and marketers started to just get into it. Like, wow, it's fascinating, and it's an interesting conversation. With the Montana debate, shutting down TikTok and things like that. But it's a fun platform, and Cardinal has a super fun brand. It's a little cheeky. I think on your LinkedIn company page, it's like it says, "Give your competition the bird," maybe with Cardinal.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so, thinking about, sort of storytelling and levity and having fun with a brand, maybe for mental health organizations, but also there's a lot of people at marketing firms that, are in my network, and some of them may be hearing this. So, how do you, from a strategic standpoint, kind of make the decision to take your brand, sort of a little bit of a fun way while staying within sort of some of the rigor of healthcare?
Yeah. I think the best advice I can give that's universal is to be authentic,
Hmm,
no matter what that is. So for Cardinal, it works really well because that is genuinely who we are. If you sit in a room with us, you might hear a couple F bombs. You might, you're going to hear us talking about what's going on our Bravo show. Like we work hard, but we like to have fun. And so our brand should exude that. And if that's not your brand, that's okay that you're not fun. Maybe your brand authentically is about trustworthiness and people go to you first always to make sure that because they trust you and they want to know what you have to say because you have proven time and time again in your content that you can be trusted. So whatever the brand is that you sit down, like if your core values as an organization are these 3 to 4 statements, what how do you translate that into your content? And so
yeah,
that's why I think TikTok is really intimidating to a lot of brands and marketing firms. You can't sit down and put out this, you know, what feels to be some corporate slideshow of we are this, we stand for this. Like you have to think about who you are as a brand and then authentically show that. People have to be part of that. You can't just put out stock images and think it's going to fly on these channels.
mhm,
If it almost is a detriment to do something that doesn't feel authentic, you kind of get like, lost equity in
mhm.
doing it. You're better off doing nothing than putting out something that's not authentic.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned you all were on the conference circuit, and I saw Alex
Yeah.
make some comment like, "Whoa, well, next time we'll have our blue blazers on, I guess, to fit in." But the first call I had with Alex, a couple years ago, it was super casual, hat backwards, maybe an F-bomb,
Yeah.
allegedly. And some of that probably flows from Alex and sets the tone and the culture, but it's from an authentic place. It's not like he's not putting on a show. Like when I see him in person, genuinely happy to see him, and vice versa. And he just brings a great energy to the room. Um, And it doesn't detract, the humor, the dad jokes, all of that doesn't detract from the expertise. And I think it actually strengthens it as long as it's not a prop, where you see brands that are trying to be funny, and then you see, like Wendy's Twitter feed, which is actually, rich, it's just like
Yeah.
coming from a great place. And they're also not the Top Gun, they're not the McDonald's or what have you, the leader in the space. So they have some, I don't know, they have some leeway too to try to make some noise and take some shots.
Yeah, it is. When you go through those exercises of sitting down and saying, who are we as a brand? You can't say, who do we want to be as a brand? It
Ah,
is, if it's not who you are, like, you sit down and you maybe you think of like your top people and you say, what qualities do they already possess? That is a representation of who we are. It's not, what
mhm,
do we wish we could be? Because it will come across as inauthentic. That's why we are who we are, because that's just who Alex is as a person. That's who we have been as a team for those of us that have been here 10 years, 5 years, however long. People that stay around at organizations are those qualities. And so then to translate that into your brand is spot on. You mentioned the Blazer thing. It was funny. The conference that we went to was a huge private equity conference in Chicago. And I it wasn't intentional, but I came in like a purple blazer, like, we're just fun. I don't own blue. I don't own a suit, like, absolutely
yeah,
not. So, it was great. I mean, it was all black and blue. I mean, mostly men, but the women too, and Alex and I were walking around and people are trying to find us, and he's like, "Just look for the girl in the purple blazer." Out of the 2,000 people here, it's the only non-black or blue blazer here. That just worked out. Like, we are who
yeah,
we are no matter where we go. We'll adapt it a little bit. I'll wear a blazer for a conference, but it may not be, your standard blue one. So,
yeah.
just living that. And I think the brand, the content you put out should be that. And if you're the dentist that, you see like these dentists on TikTok that are genuinely hilarious, they're good looking, they like to, put their content out there. They're not trying to do that, because they've seen everyone else do it. That's just who they are. They want to have fun with their day.
Hmm.
And I think if you can identify people, even like in an MSO situation, if you have providers in your network that are big personalities that you think represent who you are. It could be that they're well published and
Yeah.
are best known for what they've done in their space, and they're innovating in the care models, and that's what they put out on their social media. And maybe it's not fun and cheeky, but maybe it is truly just authentically who they are, and that's what you decide to stand behind.
Hmm. Man, the purple blazer, that's very Seth
Yeah.
Godin. Purple cow, that whole
Yeah.
concept of like us standing out. And yeah, whenever I go to Boston, I always think, oh man, I don't have nearly enough like blue dress shirts for this town.
Yeah.
But I love Boston. That's just not how, it's just not how my nature nurture, resonates. But the
Yeah.
culture, you feel when you walk into a city, I want to respect the culture, and like figure out the why behind it. And yeah, there's different priorities depending on where you go. One last question, maybe two last questions. One is, as you've gone to conferences, what's one thing that really stands out to you as like, oh, this, you don't have to mention which conference if you don't want, but this was done really well. This was really unique. What's one thing that stands out that you want to emulate with your new conference?
Yeah. I thought I think 2 things. The ability to connect with each other prior to the conference. I know, like, to have, an opportunity, even in a controlled environment, like an appointment scheduling opportunity prior, you go to these places and you go there to meet, to network that otherwise, you could get that content online if you wanted to just sit and learn about, the trends in a certain industry. You go there for the people that are going to be there, the ability to share, learn, interact with each other. So having access to the list of those people to go through and find who might be worth talking to for you and vice versa, and scheduling those appointments so you know that you're meeting at a certain time at a certain place when you get there was really refreshing. I thought that was fantastic.
Hmm.
Use of time at conferences. And then I think the other piece that I really liked about one of the conferences we went to recently was the very specialized tracks. It's not, I'm not going here to learn like macro level information again that I can get online anywhere, but to be very specific about a common problem, a common, trend that we're seeing and pull together, even if the audience of that is somewhat small of people who care about it. I thought that was really well done, was to get very specific with, the conversations that were being had.
Yeah. Facilitating connections, facilitating conversations. It's not all TED Talks and panels. It's actually, connecting with
Yeah.
kind of micro topics and individuals. That's really cool. Um, well, thank you for being on the show. I love working with Cardinal. I'm stoked Alex is going to be back this year, and we did create like a large multi-site panel conversation because of how the industry is trending. And then we'll also have the solopreneur, small. You hung your shingle and you need a website and things like that. So it's fascinating to see how the industry is developing. But I wish you all the best. Not that you need any of that for your success. But just to close, tell me something you are either reading or listening to. It could be a podcast, it could be a new album, it could be a book. What's one thing that you're consuming?
Yeah. So we are really about growing our agency and getting more of what we can do out to more people. So as a leadership team right now, we're reading Good to Great. It's essentially about how to, you know, institutionalize in not like an over the top way, belief systems that people see. It's about how to be authentic in your leadership, how to get people on board with your mission and have everyone marching in the same direction, how to be a great leader. So,
Mm,
we're just wrapping up that book as a group and we get together, we talk about it. I would highly recommend it. Yeah. And actually, let me give one more shout out to, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but any podcasts on AI, AI is so fascinating. Like, I want to know how to make my life run smoother. I want to know how to, meal plan for my family. And I want to know how to review the legal scopes that I have to read every day without being a lawyer. Like, you can do anything with AI. It's really cool.
that's fascinating. Yeah. Good to Great is Jim Collins. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a fantastic book. I went through it when I was at a SaaS based email marketing provider in Nashville, and it
Mhm.
was a game changer for the leadership team. Absolutely. Stoked to hear you guys are reading that too. Well, Lauren, it's been a
Yep.
pleasure. Thank you so much. And hope to talk to you soon, either in person or virtual or down in Atlanta or something. We'll have to connect over pizza or something. But thanks for
Yeah.
being on the
And
show today.
Antico and yeah, so we'll have to have Antico and Chick-fil-A in one day. Have you in for our conference maybe. So it
That'd
was
be
great to
fun.
be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
Thanks.